Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started?
Okay.
Thank you everyone for joining us on our Mentors and Mayhem webinar series. I am Tina Brown with Dental Practice Enhancement, and I think it's really important for us throughout our lives to have mentors. I certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel, and so I've had mentors in my personal life, in my business life, and I'm honored and I'm so excited to have our very first guest as Teresa Duncan.
Wow.
She was one of the ones, actually the one, who helped me to transition from the operatory, still in the dental industry, into doing something a little different. She and Tony Stefanou teach a course called Beyond The Operatory, and I took that class and was just so excited to know that there were other things to do in dentistry other than just being in an operatory. So thank you so much, Teresa, for guiding me and mentoring me and laughing at the silly things that I did and didn't do, because we all do them.
You did. All of us did it. Yeah.
No. But I'm just grateful to be where I'm at today. You guys are really going to enjoy what Teresa has to say. She's always got new, fresh ideas. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. With over 20 years of healthcare experience, Teresa addresses topics such as insurance coding, team growth, and revenue. Her memberships include the American Dental Education Association, National Association of Dental Plans, and the National Speakers Association. She is the host of the Nobody Told Me That podcast. And Teresa received her master's degree in healthcare management. So I think the first thing that we're going to talk about, T, is how our industry will change in the next 5 years. What do you think?
Well, there's going to be a lot of changes, I think. And I just want to say your ideas were not laughable. I mean, come on, you were just trying to find your way. And honestly, I may have started out as a mentor, but you took it all the way. I mean, look at you, you're doing so well now. So I don't think you give yourself enough credit. And I think I've told you that like a million times, right? That you don't give yourself enough credit. So what's coming in the industry? Well, my main thing is insurance. My main thing is management. And I definitely see that our way of getting reimbursed is starting to change. Even if it's slowly, we're going to start seeing more combined medical and dental plans. I definitely see that coming down the pike. We may see a point where we're contracting directly with the employers, not the insurance companies.
Wow.
And that, it excites me, but it scares me. So I think a lot of employees, when they see what some of the big companies are going to do, they're going to think that they can do it on their own. So let me give you a little bit of backdrop there. So Amazon, Walmart, JP Morgan Chase, Berkshire Hathaway, big, huge companies are starting to look at putting together their own benefit plans for their employers and not going through the insurance carriers, because they're realizing what a big overhead that is. And Walmart has already sort of started that out. They've got some clinics and they've got some dental offices in some of the Walmarts out there. We've talked about this. And I think when that starts to happen and other small or medium-sized employers start to see, hey, why do I need to pay a big check to the insurance commissioners or the insurance brokers to, take care of my plan? Why can't I just contract directly with doctors? I think we're going to see a big change in how we are asked to provide services. So my question to your audience members is, what would happen if the city, say you live in a small town or a small city, what if the city came to you and said, Dr. Brown, if you as the dentist, what if we contract directly with you to provide dental services? Would you be in a situation to, number one, price yourself correctly, and number two, handle that influx of patients? So wow. I do think we need to look at that. I'm not saying it's going to happen next year, but I would be super surprised and probably have to hang up my insurance hat if that didn't happen in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely see that happening.
Good. So also, what can we do to go to the next level in our job?
Well, I think you have to stay abreast of the situations that are happening out there and realize that it's not just management and leadership classes that you should be taking. We should be taking some serious business classes. And that is what I think a lot of people don't don't look at. You know, they'll take the classes that come to their dental society. They'll take some online classes, some webinars, some free webinars and that sort of thing. But we really need our managers and our leaders nowadays to actually have business knowledge. So I would appreciate if a lot of the new managers out there, even the veteran managers like you and me, Tina, we've been doing this a long time, take a business course, take a profit and loss statement, how to read it, take a marketing 101 course, take some sort of business course that's going to be different than what you learn in a regular dental seminar. So, and nothing wrong with dental seminars because we provide them, but sometimes it's nice to see what other industries are doing. And I think that's the only way to take it next level. And so one other thing, let's back up a little bit, because remember how we were talking about the trends of dentistry. One of the things that I think a next level manager is going to have on their plate is making sure that their staff is well trained for what's coming. And what you and I have seen is the rise of new positions that didn't exist 20 years ago. You know, how many of us had a dedicated marketing coordinator 25 years ago?
None. No.
And people emailing me saying, do you have a job description for that? And it's like, well, are you big? Are you small? Are you online? Like it's going to be different, right? Are you a specialist? It's going to be different. So I think if you are paying attention to the trends in the staffing, then you can take your management next level, because you're not just managing this one little piece of the pie. You can look a little bit outside of your office and say, you know, this one down the street, they've been talking about having an insurance coordinator. Maybe it's time for me to bring in an insurance coordinator. Maybe it's time for me to bring in a clinical coordinator that handles the operations and inventory and everything that goes on in the back. And for a lot of people, that's a shift because we just don't even know what those roles include. But you as the manager can't come up with these job descriptions and job titles unless you know what the industry is doing. So that's my next level tip is look outside of your industry or look outside of your office and go to see what other dental offices are doing by looking at, you know, the Facebook groups are a mixed bag, you know that.
Right.
But go and see how they're staffed and go to these ADOM chapter meetings, you know, the American Association of Dental Office Management, go to their chapter meetings, go to the national meeting and ask other managers, hey, what are you finding in your office? Hey, how are you staffing in your office?
Right. And I think that is very important. Years ago, I think, you know, we had to do everything in the office. There was one, maybe two of us. Things were very different. We didn't have the insurance game that we have today.
Sure.
We didn't, like you were saying, we didn't have a dedicated marketing person and all these different things that have been added to the dental office. And I think for me, it was very frustrating when I was in my last office because of the amount of things and the amount of tasks that there were to do. I'm just really grateful for ADOM for having the platform to teach and to have those classes for the ladies and gentlemen to take, because we didn't have that. We just learned from the person before us who learned from the person before them. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means maybe things could be done differently and could be done a little smoother.
Well, but we've both seen how if you learn that way, it just becomes like worse and worse and worse. And I'll say when I came on board, the lady that I was learning from, oh, it was awful. I should never have learned a thing from her. And I'm not throwing her under the bus or anything, but she didn't want to be there. She was doing it as a favor to her mom, who was the manager for so many years. And it was awful. And you, with your position in your job, you've run into queen bees who are queen bees in the office, but yet it's built on this really bad knowledge. You know, they've been taught the same thing over and over again. So I think it's so important that you accept the fact that you may not know everything. And how many times, Tina, have you heard a doctor say, well, my front office person or my manager isn't going to take any classes because she's been doing insurance for years?
Right.
What are you talking about? Because insurance 5 years ago was different.
Right. And now we have code changes every year where that didn't happen before. And it's just amazing how much more is out there to do, to learn, and we'll never stop learning. I mean, I think we always have to be out there if we want to be relevant, if our office, if we want our offices to grow, be healthy, we need to go to those classes. We need to take, like you said, management courses. We need to take business courses. The front office person is running their multi-million-dollar corporation, and they have no business knowledge, which is very different than out there in the corporate world.
Right. Well, and let's talk about that, because that's definitely a trend. So I don't know, the solo practice isn't going away. That they're not going anywhere. But will the group practices get bigger and bigger? Absolutely. And so what I like to do is see what they're doing, because I think it's brilliant what they're doing. They're bringing in business people to teach business classes. They're bringing in business people to run their clinics. And I think, honestly, if you're going to run multi-million-dollar corporations, why would you hire somebody who maybe worked at like a candle shop before? Right. And that was me. I used to work at a candle shop. So could I have run your company? Sure. But that was, again, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I could run your company. Today, oh my gosh, I would not hire me today. I don't think I would, because I would be like, who is this girl? She's fresh out of college. She's worked at a record store. She worked at a candle store. Like, what's her deal? Why is she coming to dentistry? You wouldn't hire me.
Too funny, just too funny. So tell me a little bit more about what you have experienced with some of the DSOs and some of those coming about. What is their trend these days?
I see, you know what, I think we're in the second stage of consolidation, which is really fascinating. And our friend Tony Stefanou, Dr. Tony, who I co-teach BTO with Beyond The Operatory, he also is involved with the mergers and acquisitions side. And so it's really interesting to hear his take. And I think he feels the same way. We're definitely in stage 2 now of this growth, where like the corporates came up. And then what happened was you had your regular dentist who was just kind of moving along in his practice or her practice. And then they realized they could go to 2 locations, 3 locations, 4 locations. And then all of a sudden they found themselves to be a group. Well, now the private money is taking a look at not just the Aspens and the Heartlands. They're looking at, Apple Dental, who's 4 locations. So they're starting to see the allure of buying small regional practices. However, what we're starting to see now is the big companies, the big corporations like Aspen, Midwest, Heartland, not all of them, but they're looking at purchasing these regionals that have already grown up. So it used to be where the private equity money would come in, and that means outside investors. So the private equity money would come in and purchase the Aspens and Heartlands, but now we're seeing the Aspens and Heartlands looking at, they're the ones now that are investing. So it's really becoming interesting. We're starting to see now that the definition has changed. It's not just dental services organization. Now we actually are seeing dental groups, not just services. Because remember back in the day, services organization really meant that they'd run the practice for you. And now we're seeing groups that are actually running it and providing the dentistry and providing the hiring, all of it. So that's been different. I'm also starting to hear little whispers of how the big organizations don't need insurance as much as they did before. So they're playing a little bit more hardball with the carriers as far as negotiations, and even dropping some major carriers.
Oh, wow.
I can't really speak to some of it, but there's a really big carrier on the East Coast that's being dropped by one of the large DSOs because they stopped playing games with them, basically. And that's, so right now, I think you and I would agree that the power right now is not with the providers as far as with the carriers. Right. Are we starting to swing back? Maybe. And I think the only way to swing back is if we have big organizations and doctors that are willing to say, what are we doing here? So I'm curious to see what the next wave is going to be about, but I definitely think we're in stage 2.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
What are you seeing? Because you have some group clients that you work with. What are you seeing as far as their staffing and how they're handling it?
Yeah, for the most part, they're doing inside operations. For the most part, they're handling everything inside with their training, doing things like that. We have quite a few popping up here in California, which I had never noticed before. I just kind of go on job sites every now and then, look to see who's hiring, what companies, are they more private offices? Are they more organizations? And they're popping up there. And that's why I asked, and I was curious about that, is because they seem to be around a lot here in California where they weren't before. It was more an East Coast thing.
And it's, well, yeah, and it's now the Midwest. Midwest and places with wide open spaces have been very attractive for these DSOs, because rather than acquire a practice, they can go in and build, and it's cheaper than buying a practice. So they're going in just building and staffing it themselves. So if you come out here to the East Coast, you know, we're so populated out here, you can't, it's so expensive to buy land and all of that. So it's easier for them to go to like Ohio or Indiana and purchase land. And, you know, there's still lots of industry in there. You think that there's not New Jersey level of industry, but there's still a lot of industry. And so they're purchasing these practices and putting them up there. The one thing that I think a lot of older doctors who were kind of railing against it in the beginning, a lot of older doctors are starting to realize now that their practices are successful, very successful, their personal practices. And now when they're getting to the point where they want to sell to an associate, or they want to sell or sell period, the only people who can afford their really high producing $1 million, $2 million practices are the DSOs. And it's been really, I've had quite a few talks with doctors who are almost upset at themselves because they have overpriced their practice is so profitable that they can't sell to a regular dentist coming out of school unless they hold the note for themselves, and they don't want to do that.
Right.
So it's been, I hear lots and lots of stories of frustration, and at the same time, at the end, you know, they want to retire, so they end up selling to a group practice, and I don't blame them. I want to retire too. I don't blame you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you also said that the solo practitioner is not going away. I just think that's the bread and butter of the industry. It's the heart of the industry. It's where, you know, I like to focus. And I think it's pretty special. Dentistry has been really good to me over these last 30 blah 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 years, and I've really enjoyed it, and I love what I do. I know you do too. It's an amazing field to be in.
Absolutely.
So how do we go to the next level? What do we do?
You know, the reason I think solo practitioners are never going to go away is the same reason we're never going away. I think there's just this really strong entrepreneurial spirit that you find in dentistry. So many dentists don't become doctors because they don't want to do all the paperwork. They don't want to go work for a big hospital. They see this sense of being kind of more of their own boss. And so I think that attracts a lot of people. I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think we still are going to always have that image of being kind of our independent person. Same thing with like chiropractors and, you know, vets. They kind of feel like they have their own thing. Is that going to change in 20 years where we're all owned by one company? Who knows? But for right now, that's what we are, right? So taking it to the next level, I think you have to take classes or read a couple books on what it's like to think outside the box, what it's like to think as an entrepreneur, being more comfortable with taking risks. That's one thing that I see a lot of doctors are not comfortable with, is taking risks. They like to do the same thing over and over again. The most risk that they take, and this is where doctors will be like, oh no, I'm fine with risk. I bought a CEREC machine. No, that's not risk. That's not risk. That's you getting a little bit more efficient, and that's regulations, but that's not risk. You know, risk is changing your whole practice over from insurance to fee for service. That's risk, you know, or purchasing, you know, going straight to just being an implant center, or taking the chance of being a multi-specialty practice rather than a one specialty practice. That's risk, because you have some real downsides if that doesn't work out. If the CEREC doesn't work out, it just kind of gathers dust in the corner, like most of them do. So, right? Yeah. I mean, I think they're used more, but how many times have you gone into an office? I've gone into offices and just seen them like with stuff stacked on them, or they're rolled into the little, it's awful. So maybe it's better now, but I don't know. So as far as thinking outside of the box and really thinking, how can I help my team be a better team? That, I think, if a doctor makes that shift, if a manager or doctor makes that shift and concentrates on their workers, I think you're going to see benefits for days, because your team is what's going to make or break you. We've known that for years. Your team is what's going to make or break you. And I still run into doctors all the time that are like, well, I'll just hire somebody who's good with patients and she'll learn on the job. And that's how we did it 20 years ago. You don't do that anymore. It's just, there's too much at risk now. That's a risk. Talk about that's a risk. So I think next level is realizing that you can't do it all. And as an entrepreneur, you can't do it all. I've learned I have to outsource certain things. I didn't outsource for a gazillion years. You're right at the curve. You've seen that people need help in the offices, and you opened your outsourcing business. And that, I think the doctors I've sent to you, I mean, when I see that they're able to free up their time and do more things, that just makes me happy. Like, why are we doing bookkeeping? Why are offices still doing bookkeeping? Outsource that. I know you don't do that, but outsource that, right?
Right.
Another thing that the DSOs do really well that I love is call centers. They have call centers. They outsource the answering of the phone. And honestly, when you take a look at how many times you answer the phone, a lot of it nowadays, I'm hearing there's a lot of robocalls happening at offices. That's very frustrating. And then when a patient calls about insurance, why can't your call center handle that? The people are more trained than probably your next hire. So I think there's a lot of, I think that's the next step. Outsourcing insurance claims and eligibility, you're right on top of that. And cleanup, that's smart. And I think a lot more people are open to it. I think the next step is the call centers, because people are still more holding on to that. And I remember when I was in an office, you were the same way, because you're personable. When we were in the office, we thought as long as we get the patient on the phone, we can get them to schedule. Like, just give me 2 seconds on the phone with them, right? And I think there's a lot of office managers out there that feel the same way, so they don't want to outsource that. But for the outsourcing companies I've talked to who have done this well, they have charmers on their staff too. So it's okay. I'd rather you focus on the strategy and being a better manager and doing that next step where you can take it to the next level. I'd rather you focus on that than just, giving directions for the 100th time that week to your office. I don't know.
Right.
Crazy. I don't know.
I think too that, in some respects, we've lost the patient. With all the different things that are needed to be completed in the office these days, sometimes I see offices where the checkout is just ridiculous. There's no escort to the front desk or checking out, or that's what's really important, is that touch with the patient. And so, like you said, all the other stuff is just stuff. The patient is what's important. And I think we need to bring the patient back into the conversation again, to be able to explain treatment and get them to be able to afford the treatment that needs to be done, give them different avenues and different options. And so I think that's very important, to bring the patient back in to the conversation. And sometimes doctors think, my team is doing really, really well. And, what is your scheduling rate? Are you at 80%, 90% scheduling what you treatment planned, or is it 50? We need to address that sometimes and just take a look at the bottom line and where things are, where the patients are, what the team members are doing. Just make sure everybody has the correct seat on the bus.
Absolutely. And, back to the seats on the bus thing, that's management and leadership right there. And as much as I thought I was a really good leader, I did. As much as I thought I was, when I went out there and started taking management classes outside of dentistry and reading management books outside of dentistry, I realized I was just so half-assing it, because I didn't know. And I thought it was cool to just do like games and to have like, what's your biggest secret, and name something that nobody knows about you. I thought that was all cool and stuff. That is so not cool. So it has to be more than that. It has to be showing by example and being afraid to make tough decisions that will make you unpopular. And that, when you're okay with having a bad day at the office because that means people are mad at you, or things just aren't great and you're going to power through, then you're okay as a manager. But if you're worried about upsetting people and you just want everybody to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, it's not
right.
You're just being an enabler at that point. So
right.
it's more than that. So,
and I totally agree with you. Same way. And sometimes even today in my own business, I catch myself, and because I'm a high I. I want everybody to have a good time, and I just want everybody to be comfortable, but that's not always the way to go.
No, it's not. It's funny. Speaking of the DISC certification, our friend Kevin Henry is DISC certified. So he sent me over some new tests because before I had Noah, which is 18 years ago, my boy who's a senior now and who's driving me crazy. We've talked about this, right? Yeah. I know. Remember, he used to be so tiny.
I know. He towers over you.
Oh my gosh, he's huge. Yeah. So if anybody wants to see how huge my son is, check out my Instagram or my Facebook page, because he's like a big Yeti standing next to me. But back in the day when I had no kid and it was just me and Norman, I was a very high D personality. And then after I had Noah, I realized not everything happens like the way you want it, because kids will really wake you up from that dream. Very high I with D. So I'm curious now to see what I am. But to your point, if you know your personality type and if you know how you react with other personality types, that makes you a better leader. Because I think new managers think, if I just teach them the way, they'll understand why they need to do it, and they will be just as motivated as I am. I know you're laughing because we're like, as a new manager, it sounds great, but as a manager with experience, our 30 years, we just know that's not going to happen. Yeah. So the long answer to your question, I think if you're going to be a good manager and a good business owner in dentistry, study up on being a good entrepreneurial leader, because even though you're a manager, you're still in charge of a big entrepreneurial enterprise.
Right.
And you need to pay attention to that. Yeah. Right.
And there's so many wonderful office managers out there that I've met in the last 10 years that really want to make a difference. Yes. And those are the types of people I want to work with, that they want to take their practice to the next level. They want great experiences for their patients. They desire these things. And it's so refreshing to see, because I think a few years back, we were kind of in a lull where we were just doing business as usual. But things have come to the forefront, and we really need to pay attention. And like you said, read, books outside of dentistry, and take those management classes, those business classes that will help you get to where you need to be, where you want to go, and be able to, survive in the industry.
Sure. Well, and there's so many ways to consume all that information too, so we need to get you on my podcast, but just podcasts in general. There's business podcasts that are not dentistry specific. Some of the dentistry podcasts are awesome, but if you want to learn about leadership and you don't have time to sit and read a book, there's a gazillion podcasts out there that, for you, and you download them and you listen to them on your ride in. Or I know one office manager where she listens to it at the office while she's working, and she's not distracted. She's just got this little great learning thing in her ear, and she turns it off when she needs to, but she's learning. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that she wants to go to that next level. She's not planning on ever leaving our practice. She doesn't want to own her own business, but she wants to improve the business she's in, as much as she can. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And you have to find the right way to learn for you. For me, it would be podcasts, it would be videos, as opposed to reading. I've never really liked to read that much. And when I start to read, I'll read a chapter and then I'll fall asleep. Or I'll read a chapter or 2 or 3 and then something happens. And then I put the book down and I don't pick it up for another week or so. I mean, so if I can have something in my ear or watching a video or something like that, that's how I learn. So we need to figure out how we learn also.
Absolutely. Well, and so not only that, but how does your team learn? Because if if you hand them a copy of a book, either Rita's book, Susan Gunn's book, my book, are they going to actually read it all? Even though it's short reading, are they going to read it all? Or do they need to have it, said to them? So, oh gosh, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should make the audiobook of my book. I didn't even think of doing it.
There you go.
Another project. No.
So we've kind of been talking a little bit about entrepreneurship and things like that. How hard would it be to leave a secure job and to become an entrepreneur if somebody were wanting to do that? How would you go about that?
It's scary. It's really scary. And if you remember back to when you took BTO, Beyond The Operatory, we asked on the questionnaire, how much support do you have if you were to do this? And that's probably the most key question that we have on that pre-event questionnaire, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much support do you have? Well, some people will come in and it'll be a 2, it'll be a 1. And we say to them, this is going to be almost impossible for you, because not only do you have the pressures of economic pressures, you've got family pressures and spousal pressures and all of that.
Right.
So let's just assume that you have maybe support of an 8, which is a spouse who wants to support you, or a partner who wants to support you, but the money is a concern, which is pretty much everybody. And even if you're single, money is a concern because you need to be able to pay bills, right? So you have to look at how much you have to do financial planning. You have to look at how much you're able to live on. What is your bare minimum, the bare ass minimum, BAM amount that you have for your personal expenses? And then how can you do this? So I'll share my story, and I'll share the differences in how it was when I did it versus now, if I were to do it now. So I'll tell you how I would do it now, which is very different than how I did it. So I was working full time in an office, and I was consulting on the side, just doing little small jobs for, my dentist friends and all of that, and doing small study clubs. Then I realized there's just more. I want to do more, which is, if you have that little voice in the back of your head, you had it. You have that little voice in the back of your head where you're just like, I need more, I want more. That's not going to go away. So you got to do something with it, because it's not going to go away. So I went to my boss and I said, look, there's got to be more. I got to do something. And he is still the most awesome boss ever. And he said, how do you want to do this? And it hurt him to have me leave, but at the same time, I still work for him very, very part-time, because he won't let me go completely.
Good for him.
Well, and I said, I can still do a lot of stuff for you. I can just do it remotely. So that's when I started doing all the billing and the insurance, and I started doing it remotely from home. And so, first I went to part-time, then I went to doing it remotely. So we took a look at my salary, and I said, how about for the first year, I will provide half of my time, which is really, it was all insurance, half of my time, and let's go with half of the salary. So I stepped out with half of the salary. So that was a little bit less scary. I had a spouse who was able to support us mostly, but it was still scary. We were always still, 2 or 3 paychecks away from really having to worry about stuff or hitting up my mom or whatever. So I started to drum up business. I blogged a lot. I got a lot of business from my blog. It was one of the very first dental blogs out there. It was the dental implant blog. It's long time ago. And there were only, I think, 4 other bloggers at that time, maybe 5. And so I got a lot of business from that. I took a lot of speaking gigs for very, very little, like $200, $500 amounts. And some, of course, were for free. And I just kind of built the business up. But the fear factor was real, because my husband and I set a goal that if I did not make money within 2 years, we had to figure out something. I would have to go back to working for Buddy again, full time. And so I had that goal. So I think you have to have, with any business, you have to have an exit strategy. So nobody wants to think that you're going to fail. I don't want you guys to think that you're going to fail, but let's be realistic. If you were to not have the success you had, which was not failing, it's just that it wasn't, maybe it's not the time, then you need to figure out what you're going to do with all of that. So Tina, you were really good in that you had a lot of different ideas. And so you had, if it didn't work now, it was going to work later, and your timing is perfect because it works now, right?
Right.
So that's, and I've seen that with lots of other BTO grads and other Speaking Consulting Network colleagues that have done that, where they tried something and then they went to something else, and that was what needed to work. So, and the other thing that we talked about in BTO is, do you really want to do OSHA training because you're good at it? you hate it, you're not going to like it, right? Or insurance training. Just because you're good at insurance doesn't mean you want to actually take all the questions that I do on a daily basis, right? Or you do. So you have to, so you might go out thinking, okay, I want to teach scheduling because my schedule is awesome. And then you realize that's like the tip of the iceberg. I'm so much better at this. So don't go out there being rigid with what you're going to do. Have some options, so don't go out there saying, I'm going to be your bookkeeping expert, because you may find that something different is out there. Niche a little bit later, go out there, not saying do everything, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
That's sort of a lane you want to stay in. And then as you get better at it, niche down. And that's where you're going to find the real success, the referrals and all of that. So the scary part, of course, is always money. But the scarier part to me was people seeing me not do well. And that was really important to me. And, the difference now is that there's a lot more eyes on you. So it's much harder on you nowadays. When I started this 15 years ago or whatever, Facebook was, I don't even know if it was around. Twitter, all of that, social media. So nobody knew that my phone didn't ring for a long time. Nobody knew that I hadn't traveled anywhere because I had no gigs. Nobody knew that, right? Nobody knew that I was out there on message boards looking for work or anything like that. Nobody knew that I was leaving the office to go knock on dentist doors in the area to get work. So nobody knew that. But now everything's on social media. I have people, I don't post as often on my personal Facebook page anymore. And I've had people email me that say, are you okay? Is everything okay? We don't see that much. And it's very sweet that they're concerned. But I think the perception is that I'm laying low, so something must be wrong with my business. And it's like, no, that's not it at all. But so maybe I need to be more friendly. I don't know. So, but here's the thing, that if you close, say you open up Acme Consulting, if you have to close Acme Consulting because it just doesn't work out, everybody's going to see that now. That's the scary part. So, or if you announce this, and we've had friends, ADOM friends, who have announced big changes to go work someplace, and then they end up coming back to something else, and you can't help but think, what happened there? So I think to me, that's scary now that you're so out there. So I'm kind of glad for that anonymity back then. But there's the other side of that. The great other side of that is that now you can promote yourself more. So back in the day, I had to get out on the streets. I had to go to the dental associations. I had to write blog posts. I had to beg to get my articles printed. And now, everything's online. These organizations, these magazines are begging for your articles. It's easy. Right. Anybody can get published nowadays. And some that shouldn't, but there's a lot of people that get published. You really can promote yourself now out there now. So if you're thinking about making the change, you have to not be afraid to say that you're really good at what you do. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to say, I provide this service and I do a damn good job of it. You can't just kind of go, well, I do that and let me know if you're interested. No, there's follow-up. There's, you got to circle back to people. You got to be aggressive, not too aggressive, but aggressive enough. Right. Yeah, there's a lot that goes with that. So I think as much as the financial fear is a big thing for people, to me, the mental aspect is the biggest. Yeah. So are you ready? Are you ready to make the step out? And are you ready to not have it go so well? That's the big part. True.
Very, very true. I mean, even for myself, I thought I wanted to do one thing and I got into it and thought, what were you thinking? This is not such a good idea. And so finding your niche. And that's what's so cool these days is we don't have to do everything. We don't have to know everything. We can just kind of, like you said, get ourselves in that niche and buckle down and be really, really good at something. And so, but I say it's a little easier these days, probably not so much, but it's possible. If you have a drive and you have a vision and you have a goal, then it's possible.
And one other thing, you and I have talked about this a lot. I think we talked about this before. If you were really good at running one office, that doesn't mean that you're going to be really good at running a lot of other offices or consulting. Sure. So yes, and you may be really good at what you do, but this is coming from somebody who really thought that they could go out there and like blow the water out, you know, and just incredible in all these offices. The offices are so different. They're not all run the way yours is run. They're worse. They're much worse. And you're not going to get the dream office that calls you because everything goes well, because they don't need you. They've either been working with someone or the doctor's got good leadership skills. So the offices are going to call you are going to be in the worst shape. And are you ready for that? It's very, very hard. And I think if you want to be a consultant, I need you to go and get in contact with your representatives in the area, your dealer reps, your Shines, your Pattersons, your Biolays, all the distributor reps and all the dealer reps, and say, can I shadow you for a day? Can I, get into these offices? You need to get in as many offices as possible just to observe. Don't pitch yourself or anything. Just go and observe, because what you see will surprise you. It will very much surprise you. And I think I've said this in BTO, you need to be in at least 20 offices before you even can make a decision on leaving. And really, you can't be a good consultant unless you've been in at least 100 offices observing, because there's so many different ways of doing it. And for you to call yourself a consultant right away and offer great advice, what you're offering is great advice, but it was great advice for your specific situation and not this doctor, because you just don't know any better. And I made that mistake. Lots of new consultants make that mistake. Lots of them. So you've been in a bunch of offices. Haven't you seen that, where you think you've seen it all and then you're like, no, this is it.
There's always something exciting around the corner.
Right.
Now, for me, it's important for me to have a support team. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's hard for somebody who's a control person to do that. So I had to learn, thankfully I have Norman who handles the back end, the billing and all of that. And he does the book orders and all that. He likes that. That's the kind of stuff he wants to just do on the, kind of in the shadows. He's fine with that. When I had employees, I did need a support team. I needed a team to bounce things off of. I needed somebody to really kind of say, maybe we should do this or explore other opportunities. I think it's really important to have a support team. Now that I'm back to being my own thing and just consulting just speaking and podcasting and writing, I now have an outsourced team. So I have a really great social media person. I have a really great strategist that helps me. And I will work with any of the other entrepreneurial services out there that when I need it, like design, I have somebody who does my podcast. Like, I'm not going to try to do it myself. And I know it's very tempting to pull up Canva and do your own designs. And then when you see them, you're like, oh my gosh. I'll share with you, my newsletter from 5 years ago was just the ugliest thing ever. And I thought it was awesome. And my newsletter person took over and she redesigned it. I was like, oh, wow. Like, it looks good, but it looks awful. But it looked, you know what? Because I'm utilitarian. I want to give you the information. I don't care about all the other stuff. So it is nice to have a support team, and it's nice to share ideas. So do you have a mastermind, Tina? Do you mastermind with anybody or have any business people that you kind of bounce ideas off of?
I do. Yes, absolutely. In social media, again, I work with a great social media expert. Again, with that's funny that you mentioned the logo. My logo was like, oh my gosh, my first logo was the best. It was like, I loved it. And things were great. And I was on Facebook and I thought, wow, I'm just tearing it up. And then I had a good friend of mine call me and say, randomly, okay, she used to live here in California and she moved to Georgia, and she just texts me one day random, hey, is Facebook doing what you want it to do for your business? I'm like, what?
Sounds like a sales pitch, right?
I thought it was good. I'm like, what's the problem? And so we had a discussion, and she's on my team now, and I'm just so grateful for her because she kind of pointed me in the right marketing direction. I mean, we actually were Bible study partners, and I didn't know she had a marketing degree. Nice. I knew she was getting ready to go to law school, but I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, and so we've been, she's been on my team for a couple of years now, and we're moving in great directions. And we have, my husband is an IT person by trade. However, I outsource my email stuff, backup kind of things to another company because I want to stay married.
Yeah. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, he takes care of all the computers with my team and things like that. But the bigger things, whatnot, because he still works full time. And one of these days we'll bring him on with the company. But yeah, again, you have to outsource. You can't do it all. And I learned that the hard way. And it's nice to have these people in my company and be able to bounce things off of them, and just different things you want to do, different arenas you want to be in. We have to have that support, and I've met with Janice Hurley, and that was amazing. And I'm going to tighten some things up with Catherine Eitel-Belt. And so it's just, always moving forward, learning new things. And so.
Absolutely. And I think too, masterminds are a great way of keeping that going. So you have your geniuses on staff. I don't have a staff anymore except for outsourced people. So I have 2 masterminds that I belong to. One is 2 rock stars in dentistry, and we kind of keep it quiet, but we meet once a month by phone, catch up personally real quick, and then we go over, hey, what are you seeing? What am I doing? How can we promote ourselves, and how can we, make it better? And we actually run all of our new ideas. They're the ones who came up with the name of my podcast for me, because, it was funny because we just were talking about it, and I was like, I got to get a name. And one of them said, well, why do you even have a podcast? And I said, because I'm tired of people coming up to me and saying, well, why didn't somebody tell me that? Nobody told me that. And if I had every time somebody said nobody told me that, I would be so rich. And they were like, well, that's the name of your podcast, dummy. Like, you need someone to tell you that. And then I have a podcast with 2 people I've never met. They're not in dentistry at all. They're business people, 2 totally different industries. And we once a quarter get on a call and just say what we're doing. And they tell us they say what they're doing marketing wise. And I say what I'm doing marketing wise. And that's the part of going outside the industry. When I see what they're doing, one's in publishing, I see what they're doing. I'm like, oh, why would I not be doing that in my side too? So I think it's really important to have people that you trust to mastermind with. You don't have to get real close to them, but just get on a call and say, look, this is what's said on this call stays on this call. We don't just divulge industry secrets, but how can we help each other grow? Right. And, you were at SCN, you're a member of Speaking Consulting Network, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a great place to find people to mastermind with,
yeah.
Or reach out to somebody who you admire in the industry and see if they would be willing to take you on either as a mentor or as part of a mastermind. To me, that is the real beauty of being an entrepreneur, is finding something that works and then sharing it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You're taking notes.
I am. I mean, we can't have you on this webinar and not take notes and really understand what's going on, right? Hello.
I tell you what, one of the best reviews I ever received on one of my classes was, I ran out of ink in my pen. So, you can't come to one of my classes and not take notes.
That's right. Everywhere you go, you got to be learning.
That's right.
So I'm going to open it up to chat to see if anybody has any questions for you.
Absolutely.
Anybody that's on this webinar, if you have a question for Teresa, go ahead and put it in the chat box. It's probably at the bottom of your screen, right underneath Teresa.
You need to pull that out too.
Yeah, what we have. Okay. I have one here. Okay. After reading books and taking classes, how can office managers or team leaders get the owner doctor to be more open to change and advancement? I love that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So what we find I'm going to assume this is a motivated team leader, because not only is she taking time out of her day or his day to listen to this podcast that doesn't have, or webinar that doesn't have CE, they're following both of us. So I think that they're different than other managers. So I'm going to assume that when you typically go to your boss with these ideas, there's just a lot of, what's that going to mean? There's going to be a lot of change. Change is really, really scary for doctors, anyone really. But for doctors who are in a situation that's comfortable, there's nothing really wrong, you want to just take it to the next level. For them, there's no real big impetus to change because things are good, right? So you have to tie it into, not that it would make his or her life easier, not that it would make your life easier. It always has to go back to the patient. And so if you want to bring on this new scheduling system or this new handoff system, let's say it's a new handoff system, you want to change things up and you want to do things better because you've done the research. Here's the thing. You've done the research, you've run through all the scenarios in your mind, and you're very comfortable with what you're getting ready to suggest. Not that you saw it somewhere else or that you think it's a good idea and, ooh, that would be cool. You've thought about it and really can see the benefits of it. Because I think a lot of managers, doctors hear a lot of managers get really excited with something, they come back and then it kind of crashes and burns. So you have to make sure when you're suggesting something, you've done all of the options and you can give them the pros and the cons. And you always tie it back to, this is what I think would be better for the patient. So if we were to bring this person up front and do the handoff desk side, that would make sense for the patient because of blah, 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 right? So, or we check them out in the operatory and it would make sense for the patient because of whatever the reasons are. It's not because, well, and it would free up Sally's time and, it just wouldn't be a clutter at the desk, which means that Jean has to get off the phone early and, they're never ready for us up front. That nothing to do with it. It always has to go back to how it's going to improve the efficiency and the flow of the office, and will it be better for the patient? And when your doctor starts to see over time that that's what you're concerned with, that automatically elevates you in their mind, because you're not just trying to make people around you happy. You're not just trying to implement the newest, latest, and greatest that they also read about on Facebook. So I think you have to make it always tie back to the patient and how it's going to help the patient.
Okay. So I do have another question. My question goes back to the dental office. For a predominantly PPO dental practice, what is the best approach for the office to begin eliminating plans to move forward fee for service?
This is a very common question, very good question. And I think it's becoming more and more common. So I think insurance carriers are starting to realize too that they really need to step up their game, because a lot of us offices are starting to do the math. So let me give you a little bit of math tips here. So this was really fun to do last ADOM. Do you remember, Tina? Were you in my class, Tina, at the last San Antonio ADOM, and we did the insurance participation workshop?
Yes.
So that was a lot of fun, because what I did was I had people bring in their reports and we went through what it means and what you should do. So just real quick, what I would do is take a look at your new patients and see who's sending you the most new patients. So this, of course, means that you've been tracking this. You're not just letting that referred by field go empty. So if that's the case in your office, start that now, making sure that that's a deal breaker. It has to be filled in, because you can't make good decisions if you don't have that data. So who has sent you the most new patients? So in your top 10 refers, if most of those are insurance companies, you're upside down. So what I need you to do is take a look at who sends you the most from an insurance carrier point of view, because if you're going to drop that one, you need to be really ready, right?
Yeah.
So then you run the reports of how much revenue is tied to each carrier. Unfortunately, with a lot of our software systems, you can't run one that says MetLife, all MetLife. You have to run multiples, because your MetLifes are put in there all at different, you can do ranges, but sometimes we have them set up differently. So you're going to have to run a report. They're not easy reports to run. You're going to have to do some math. That's why we took math in high school and college, because of these reports, right? So you're going to run the reports. You're going to take a look at how much revenue was tied to your insurance patients, and then compare what that revenue could have been if you were at full fee, right? So you can run the report based on fee schedule 1, which is typically your full fee. And then you can run your revenue based on the actual fee schedule that you were using in the computer. So what I mean by that, if you have MetLife fees entered into the computer, that's one production number. But then if you were to run it using fee schedule 1, which is your full fee, you'll see then the difference in fees. It's going to knock you off your feet. You will need to drink. You will need to self-medicate. You will need to walk. Right, Tina? You've seen these numbers. They're huge, and doctors don't realize how huge they are.
Right.
So you take a look at who's your biggest revenue trimmer. Unfortunately, that's who's trimming your revenue down. And then ask your front office team, what is the worst carrier that you work with as far as appeals and denials? Because you may be losing a little bit of money from this carrier, but when you talk to your team and you realize that they're appealing every claim that comes through, that's your cost of labor. You have to take a look at that too. So I would cut the low-hanging fruit. So plans that never send you anybody and you're not, just get rid of them. Get off network. Just trim, right? Just trim. Yeah. Then you have to have a plan. It has to be, you cannot drop a plan in a month. It has to be a 6 to 8 month process where you're talking to patients as they're coming in and saying, just want to give you a heads up. Next time you're in, we may not have this plan as a preferred plan. That still means you can come to us. We'll do the work on it. So, gosh, there's a lot that goes into that. And hopefully, if you're in the area, I don't know if the person who asked is up in the Pacific Northwest, but at the Pacific Northwest Dental Conference, I'm doing a participation workshop. And so we'll do sort of the same thing. And, if it's not good for you, then let your state dental society know you want something like this, and maybe I can come to your area.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. And a lot of the conversations I just talked about are in the book. So, you can certainly, I don't even have a copy of the book. How bad is that for someone?
Oh, Teresa.
I know.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I'm a seasoned business manager for a practice. I want to manage more than one office, or at least know what it's like. How can I break into the wave of corporate dentistry as a manager?
Okay, so I'm going to ask you how your LinkedIn is doing. So your LinkedIn profile, a lot of dental people don't think about LinkedIn being a good networking. They kind of just think that they'll look in the ads or whatever. Beef up your LinkedIn profile. Make sure all your skills are on there. Go to Tina's profile, go to my profile, and check out how we have it worded. Go to other dental office managers in the area that you know and respect and see how their resumes are worded. Because when you apply to corporate dentistry, they will not only check your resume, but you will have recruiters that will look for you on LinkedIn. I know quite a few recruiters for these corporations, and they do look at LinkedIn. So you need to beef up your LinkedIn profile. So just assuming that was done. The other thing I would do is reach out to people who work at these corporations and let them know that you are open to talking with them. Don't go beating on their door and say, I want to get hired by you. I want to do this. Let them know that you would be interested in a conversation. You may need to send a resume just so they have it on file. I also would take a look at going to your state dental society, because most of those groups either have a booth there because they want doctors, or they're looking for managers. So your best bet is when there's a new group that's coming into town, they are always looking for qualified people in the area. And in fact, I was at a chapter in Oregon, and what happened was new groups came in and they pretty much poached every good dental assistant in the area.
Oh, wow.
So all the solo practitioners were like, what the heck? We just lost so many of our assistants. But the groups were offering benefits, good salary, set hours where you weren't working late, because they can do that. Right. So, keep an ear out for what's coming in the area. It's really good to know your dealer reps, your Shines, your Pattersons, your Bencos, because they know who's coming in the area as well. Right. So I would talk to them, see if you can network. But I think you have to make sure that you've got the qualifications, which are that you've taken more courses than just your regular dental society courses. Perhaps you took some courses in business that are outside of dentistry. That I would absolutely put on there. There's a lot of certifications, business certifications that you can take, not necessarily, that are going to cost you tons and tons of money. But the fact that you went out and looked for more classes with a certificate attached to it, that's going to show me that you're really up for it. So, yeah, so you got a couple things to do there.
Good. Well, our time is just about over, and that went fast. A lot of great.
You and I, when we get together, it does go fast. We don't have enough time.
I know. So I just want to thank everybody that was on the webinar today. We really appreciate it, and I thank you so much, Teresa, for taking time out of your busy schedule, because I do know how busy you are.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Always a
And
pleasure.
good. So thank you so much. And this is going to be a series, Mentors in Mayhem, and we've got a lot of other great speakers coming up. Let's see, we have Roy Shelburne, we
Oh, he's
have
fun.
Catherine Itel Belt, we have Lois Banta, and a host of others that will be joining us throughout the year.
Great.
So again, thank you, everybody. Everybody says thank you to you, Teresa, and we'll see you next time.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.